Welcome to Colorado Soul Stories, showcasing changemakers and creatives, past and present, who have helped to make Colorado not just a pretty place to behold, but a soulful place to be. I'm your host, Mama Jill, longtime Colorado resident, former teacher, and freelance journalist. Let's get started with our next episode.
For more. These folks are my family, these folks are my home. We'll rebuild these streets and houses, help those that need the most, support our brothers and sisters, and tomorrow we will toast.
The much anticipated Sunnyside Music Festival is coming up September 13th at Chaffee Park in Northwest Denver. This is their 25th year of bringing music and community together. From its humble beginnings as a grassroots gathering in a local backyard, the free event has grown to support local bands, businesses, artisans, and youth organizations. Proceeds of this event go to grants for neighborhood youth, arts, and music programs. This year, I'll be interviewing folks from the neighborhood on a special episode of Colorado Soul Stories. Hope to see you there. Hi, guess what? I am going to interview one of the most influential people of my life, my son, Gray. Gray was the first person to name me Mama, and it has been an honor to support, nurture, and overall just watch in amazement as my one and only child has developed into an intelligent, thoughtful, and interesting individual that cares about the earth and all its inhabitants. I was a single mom for most of Gray's childhood. Our house was happily filled with projects of all kinds, experiments with cooking, charting out adventures outside the home, and sleepovers with friends. It has been a joy for me to witness his evolution as a person. When Gray still lived at home as a young adult, I cherished our conversations over coffee. Join us today as we discuss how tinkering freely at home led to a stint in the film industry, and how during COVID he taught himself to swap out the engine in his beloved Subaru, which led to a whole other career. Figuring out what to do with your life after high school can be a challenging task. Gray refers to his path as non-linear. Listen in and get his version of how to choose your career. It's Mama Jill, and I am in Salida, Colorado at our Chavano Avenue studios. I'm here with my son, Gray Carstens, who's visiting me. Welcome, Gray.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Enjoying the thin mountain air up here and
A little smoky.
remembering to double hydrate from normal.
Absolutely. Very important. If you're visiting Colorado, please drink water. So we're going to start off with, like I do with most people, about your background and what you're doing. Gray is going to UCD, University of Colorado in Denver, and he's getting a degree in electrical engineering. Prior to that, he did many, many other things, which I think is kind of cool. So why don't you tell us that journey, evolving into this field of study?
Yeah, I would say I had a very non-linear path of figuring out what I wanted to do in my life. And I've tried to sort of be a spokesperson of encouraging other people to do that, because I think that the hardest part of figuring out your life is figuring out, what actually makes you happy, the things you want to do that are fulfilling in a low energy, low effort manner, where the work doesn't necessarily feel like work, or if it is work, it's work that you're willing to do that isn't, draining you, know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are stuck in the loop of you just go to college right out of high school. But I think the hard thing about going right into college out of high school is a lot of the real critical thinking skills that you gain as an adult come from just raw life experience. And I don't really think that college gives you those life skills. College does help with critical thinking, absolutely, especially if you
Hopefully.
pursue a STEM field.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a huge believer in just going out there and seeing the world, and you don't have to travel necessarily, but just understanding people and understanding what the world actually looks like that you're trying to fit yourself into. Because if you just stay in a classroom for 4 years after you graduate high school, you are not really interacting with the world.
Right.
You're just interacting with other academics. And, after, my tenure working at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, that even, I would say, is sort of an extension of the academic world.
Interesting.
You are with very like-minded individuals that all kind of understand this general concept of how the world is and how things operate, and everybody is highly educated, but your average Joe is not. And I'd say that the average person looks at the world much differently than an academic does. And
Right.
you want to make sure that if you are pursuing engineering and you're designing a product, that you're designing a product that people will know how to use. And,
Yes. So it sounds to me like you're saying there's a combination of perhaps raw street smarts and having lived outside of academia, combined and stirred in with studying and learning and.
Yeah, because it's one thing to study hard. And in high school, you kind of just know that you have to study hard and do well in school just so you can graduate
Right.
and get your degree, because most pizza places won't even hire you if you don't have at least a GED.
Right.
So there's all of this pressure to do really good in high school, and then what happens to most people that don't pursue higher education is they kind of just look back at that time as a waste of time. And like, we worked so hard to do all of these classes and do all of these things, and then we're not really using any of those skills that we worked so hard to build in high school in the real world.
Right.
And that was very much my belief as well, right after I graduated high school, because my first career was in film, and there was not a whole lot of crossover with the things that I learned in high school versus the film industry. The film industry was, in many ways, I think, one of the most important chapters of my life, because it really did show me human nature in its most raw form. And being in a very competitive field where most of the entry-level positions are not paid was very eye-opening to me. So navigating the film industry right out of high school and then trying to go to film school as well at the same time, I very quickly kind of understood that film school was not really a one-way ticket into a career.
Right.
And I looked at my situation and I went, well, if I have the same likelihood of getting a career in the film industry with or without a degree, I'm just going to go for it.
Right.
And so I dropped out of film school after a year. I did one semester at Red Rocks Community College, and I did one semester at the Colorado Film School, which at the time was like the 7th best film school in the country. And I had a very negative experience at the Colorado Film School, as you know.
Oh, no, yeah. I was frustrated for you.
I understand, especially in retrospect now that I'm in engineering school, that there are weed out classes. Mm-hmm. But in engineering school, a lot of the weed out classes aren't till like your second year.
Oh.
Whereas like Colorado Film School was immediately like, we're going to crush your dreams.
Yeah.
And if you're still willing to push through, then maybe you can come for the next semester.
Yeah. Yeah. Very rough. And I'm his mom, but he's got a very creative mind as well as an analytical mind. Both hemispheres communicate very well in this young man. And you did some really cool stuff. He was making films at age 8 or 10 or something.
Yeah, and they weren't, like Sundance Film Festival
But
kind
you
of
were
films.
you were very young, and you made like stop motion Lego stuff that had humor in it, and had a burgeoning ability to have made that into something. And maybe going to school wasn't even necessary. You know.
And I would agree, and that kind of gets back to my point
Yeah.
of that was a clear situation where I should have just not gone to film school at all and just gone out in the world and seen where that would have gotten me. And I did. So after I dropped out of film school, I, got just a regular job and started looking for a job in film. And eventually a friend of mine that was in film school referred me to a company. And I ended up getting hired on as a contract photographer for a film company that primarily did contracts with like youth dance competitions and youth rodeos. The angle, of course, being that you can sell a lot of that stuff to the parents because the parents want their photos and videos, and these are those types of events where they don't allow outside photography. So it's sort of like Disneyland,
right.
you know, where you go on the ride and you know the picture's $50 and you know, so it was, you know, it was a sound business strategy, maybe a little exploitive.
Yeah, they had a
know
lot
if
of young
that's a word,
people
but-
working for them. Remind me, though, you worked for a small production company that was making like a YouTube series about cars or something. You were kind of...
Oh yeah, so I was a production assistant
Yeah.
for a TV show on Velocity
Yeah.
for a single season. It was called The Lifted Life.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
And I got that job through connections at Denver Open Media, which is now gone,
Right.
of course. Yeah, so I started interning at the Denver Open Media Foundation. You got me in their youth group when I was, I think, in like 10th grade. And then once I was a senior in high school, the station manager who ran the youth group, she was like, hey, you know, you could keep volunteering here as an intern, and there, you know, could be opportunities down the road or potential for a job.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those just things that I did straight out the gate before I got this job at the other film company. So through that, one of the board members of Denver Open Media was doing this Velocity TV show, and he was looking for a production assistant, and I was hired. I was one of two production assistants that was hired, and pretty quickly they basically determined that the other production assistant that was a little older, I think she was 22 and I was 17, that she was a more ideal candidate. So they let me go at the end of the season, and I also got in trouble with that job because I was making a lot of technical suggestions for production, and the director didn't like that. Well, and it was hard because at the Open Media Foundation, him and I were on a first name basis,
Right.
and so I felt very comfortable around him. And
You
so
probably had some good ideas.
I did. He took almost all of my advice, but I remember, I think like 2 weeks into filming, and I think we filmed all summer, so it was like 3 or 4 months of filming. About 2 or 3 weeks in, he just kind of like pulled me by the ear into a corner. He was like, "You can't."
By the ear?
Not literally, but
okay.
you know, but
Well, you were young. You didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do remember you got stuck like transporting film across town during rush hour.
Yeah, there was
all the time.
Yeah, I had to deliver footage to the editor pretty often, and I don't think I even got compensated for my mileage. So I didn't get paid.
Yeah.
The only compensation I got was I got fed every day, you know, and I am in the credits. If you go, so that show does stream on Amazon, and you can, I think it's season 2 or 3.
Okay.
I'm in the credits
I
as a
remember
production
we
assistant.
saw that.
But yeah, that was a hard job. And so I was excited when I got the job at the next film company because it was a paid gig.
Right.
And, you know, it was contract work, so not ideal, but that's how most film jobs are. You know, my friend Max, you know, he's all contract work with all the stuff that he does, and he does Netflix shows. So that's just how it goes. So the transition from production assistant to an actual photographer within about, I think it was only about a year between those two.
I think so, yeah.
And you know, for the first year it was fine because, you know, the pay wasn't great, but it was enough for me to sustain living with you and being able to buy whatever food I wanted. I think I bought a couple of cars and sold a couple of cars during that
and
time.
you traveled, not always to fun places, but you got to see more of America.
I did. I got to see Branson, Missouri and Davenport, Iowa.
I think you went to Nashville once.
Did go to Nashville once.
Somewhere in California.
And I remember there was one time we went to this very scary little town in Arkansas where the hotel had 6-inch bulletproof glass for the, you know, the clerk. And there were bullet marks in the glass.
Oh, my God.
You know,
These are things I didn't know at the time.
I got to see all of the... America at its best and America at its worst. I mean, I also got to go to the Mall of America. And, you know, Minneapolis, and you know, there were some good cities, but there were a lot of not great cities that I went to.
It was a good way to know that Colorado's not too bad.
No, I basically determined that, you know, I think I'm okay with living in Colorado, maybe Washington or Oregon, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Those are really the only states that I would be comfortable living in, and I don't like humid climates, so it's kind of...
I don't know too many people that do.
But
We're going to take a quick pause to hear from one of our local sponsors.
Every year, Americans generate 1,700 pounds of trash per person. That's the equivalent of 50 garbage trucks full every single minute. And did you know that every single piece of plastic ever made still exists today? And it all eventually breaks down into microplastics that enter our bodies and affect our health. Ew! But what if you could cut your plastic waste by 60% overnight just by changing where you shop for groceries? Welcome to Nude Foods Market, where we make plastic-free grocery shopping convenient, easy, joyful, and local. We have everything from produce, snacks, meat, and fresh bread to home care, body care, and ready-made meals. The big difference is that our deeply researched organic and local groceries come pre-packaged in returnable glass jars. You shop just like a regular store. The only difference is that instead of putting all that packaging into landfill when you're done with it, you bring it back to us to be reused hundreds more times. Visit our stores in Denver and Boulder and get $10 off your first shop. Go to nudefoodsmarket.com/CO Soul to claim your coupon. We're locally owned, women owned, and working hard to fix our broken food system. So hope you can pop in and check us out soon.
So, well, remind me how you decided to go back to school.
so it was a long road. I mean, I just realized this a couple of days ago. When I get my bachelor's degree at the end of this school year, it'll be 10 years since I graduated high school.
But you've done so much. So Gray did some, you know, regular just whatever jobs, like working at the hardware store and
Working at a Domino's.
you but you saved money enough for a down payment on a house.
Yeah, I did try and buy a house, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think that factors in a little bit maybe to deciding to
yeah.
go the college path again.
No, absolutely. So basically, the way my photography career ended is I saw some not great things happen, and those always happened at the rodeos because the rodeos were 2 weeks long, and they had everybody staying in these, you know, campers, you know, just camper trailers that we rented. And it's hot, you know, it'd always be like, there's one time it was in Hot Springs, Wyoming. Is that? No.
So there's a place there called something like that. Cold Spring.
Rock Springs.
Rock Springs.
Yeah. So we did Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Huron, South Dakota, and just these very dry, very hot, very isolated places. And, you know, we'd all carpool up there. So, you know, sometimes I had a car, sometimes I didn't. And, you know, when you drive up there with a group of people and you're just stuck on rodeo grounds for 2 weeks, you know, people get cabin fever, and
There was some drinking, maybe.
a lot of drinking, and more than drinking on some people's account. But it was just very hard, you know, and the pay was not great. You know, I think in that 2 week span, I maybe made, if we did a lot of sales, it was like $1,500. And if we didn't have a lot of sales, it was like $900.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and then that would be the last thing we did for the season. And then there was like almost 6 months of off time before we got back into it.
Right. It was seasonal. Yeah.
It was seasonal work. So after 2 years, I did 2 full seasons with that company, and then I kind of just naturally realized, you know, this. I've seen people that have done this for 20 years, and they're not really what I vision myself wanting to be when I'm in my 40s, you know.
Yeah, sure.
So, but you know, I gained incredible knowledge about photography, about videography. Yeah. You know, I got to travel a bunch. There were a lot of perks that kind of. So I don't consider it a horrible time in my life. You know, there were a couple rough moments in what was otherwise 2 years of me, I think, kind of learning how to be an adult. And, you know, I got really good at traveling.
Yes, you did. I remember watching you pack very efficiently.
I think I did this, you know, ages 19 and 20.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I got really, really good at just, you know, traveling and seeing the world and navigating public transportation and, you know, dealing with rental cars and, you know, a lot of stuff that most young people never really get any experience with until they're like 26. Yeah. So after 2 years, I went, okay, this has been great. This has been a great, you know, learning a lot of important knowledge about just being an adult. But, you know, I've learned everything I can with this job.
And I don't remember you being quite that, like, understanding about what you learned in the moment. I mean, we all go through those things.
In the moment, it was just, I got to get the hell out of here.
Right. And later you realize, well, I learned this, this, and this. So that's not a, you know, wasn't a complete fail. I wouldn't say failure. Failure is a strong word, but thinking of David Duchovny's podcast where he talks about what we learn from our mistakes or things that didn't work out like we wanted them to. And we all have those things, and they're necessary to having a deeper, reflective, successful life, I think.
Right. Yeah. So that was the end of my first career. Right there was my career in film. So, you know, I decided not to come back for the next season. We were in off season anyway, so I needed a job. And so this was fall of 2019. And so I just found a job at a car dealership for doing stock photography of the cars. And so I said, you know, it pays good. I think it paid $19 an hour. And I was like, you know, I can do this for the winter time, and then I'll look for something else once I figure it out. And that was a time when I was interested in cars a lot too. And I hadn't really done anything job wise with cars yet. So I was like, oh, well, this could be interesting. And of course, once I got into the job, I realized that they just had you use an old, like a 7-year-old cell phone owned to take the pictures of the cars. You're using like a $70,000, you know, car turntable.
Right, I remember that.
To take these pictures. You got this nice photo studio, and then you're doing it with like a Samsung Galaxy S6, I think.
Goofy.
So
goofy.
But anyways, so I was like, whatever, it's an easy job. You could listen to podcasts all day and do it, and it was easy. I don't think I ever got in trouble. I don't think I ever made a single mistake. You know, I think I missed a couple of photos here and there, or a couple of cars or whatever. But anyways, did that for a good long time. And then
the pandemic.
Right. So March of 2020, the pandemic hit, and the dealership owners were not taking it seriously. So we had, I think at the time, like 25 confirmed cases of COVID.
I don't know if you told me that.
Not at the dealership, but in Colorado.
Yeah.
2 of which were people that worked at the dealership.
Okay, that's enough, yeah.
And one of them was still working and not isolating, even though, you know, at that point, it was like, we don't know how dangerous this virus is, and people were already dying. And it was a very scary time. So to see people still coming into work at the dealership, actively testing positive for this virus, I called out of work and I messaged the people that I worked for did not own the dealership. They were a separate company that were contracted through, kind of similar to the dance photography stuff. And so I messaged the people that were in charge of me, and I said, hey, listen, we got confirmed positive cases at the dealership. I'm not coming in because they're not isolating. Right. And they told me, well, if you don't come in, you're fired. And I said, well, then I'm fired.
I said, look at what people did. Wow.
Yeah. I said, I'm not going to sacrifice my life for this job. Are you kidding me?
I was so happy when both you and Jeff could just come home. Jeff was still going into the office. You were going, you know, I canceled preschool. You know, we didn't have preschool anymore. It was my retirement year anyway, and the parents didn't like that, but we were scared. We didn't know what was going on. People were dying. It was super scary.
People were dying, and we didn't know. You know, the only advice that we were getting at that time was wash your hands for 20 seconds.
My God. And stay 6 feet apart. Maybe the masks came in later.
I think the masks started around then too. Yeah. But
And then we had the stay-at-home order, and then
we had to
everybody-
stay at home, and it was, and so I used that time to reflect on everything with, the photography job, with school, and just life, and in that moment, I just said, okay, well, we're in this right now. We're not going, this is clearly going to be a multi-year saga of COVID. I realized that pretty quickly, like, this is not going to end in a year. And so I went, I've got money saved. I think I had a pretty decent amount of money saved at the time.
You bought that 3D printer.
I did. I bought a 3D printer for lockdown.
Yeah.
Just a crappy little $180 3D printer from China. And, it came in a box disassembled, had to put it together. And I mean, that was in many ways kind of the first little dipping my toes into any sort of STEM stuff. Because before then, I think I maybe had a welder at that point, and I had messed around with welding.
You were fixing cars.
Car exhaust and stuff like that. But I still was very new to working on cars and stuff at that point. I had done some stuff.
Yeah.
I had done more than maybe your average person at that point.
But I will chime in as his mother. He always had a proclivity to take things apart and put them back together, did Legos all the time, but yet you could also do these artful things. That's, and as a teacher, I knew that was good communication between the hemispheres of the brain. So, for a good about a year, Jeff, my husband, we all had our sections in this small 1,200 square foot house.
Yes.
Yeah. He was in the laundry room working from home. You had your room and the 3D printer. Mm-hmm. And I made myself an art studio by the front door in a little nook. And we each had our little areas, and then we'd always, cooking became more important, and we had some watching movies, I mean, in that way, that was kind of nice for me to nest with my family and not go to work every day for the first time and ever.
Yeah.
But we got through it, and remind me how the rest of the journey went towards.
Yeah, so I just sort of recognized that for now we just need to kind of sit idly by and let this thing and just focus on.
Well, you weren't idle though. You weren't idle.
Well, and focus on passions.
Yes.
Focus on passions because
good.
working was impossible unless you were going to DoorDash or work in a restaurant. And I just I recognized that, I was still living with you. I had the option to not work, and I had money saved, and I thought, let's just ride this out as long as we can. And then if something comes up, then great. But for now, just need to focus on what's immediately in front of me.
You were working out with weights and
I did. I got really into weightlifting and really
making giant rolls of toilet paper as a joke.
Oh, I do. Yeah, we did do that.
I still have that picture
as
on the
a prank
fridge
for you, I think, because of the toilet paper obsession.
Right.
But I got really more invested in working on cars because I had my yellow Subaru WRX. And before COVID, even I had bought some really expensive parts that I was going to install on it, and I was kind of waiting for time to get into that. And so after I lost my job, I just went, well, I'm just going to focus on working on this car.
Yeah.
And so, it was a pretty involved process of swapping out basically all of the drivetrain on that car. So I bought another car that had all of these really nice parts.
I remember you pulled the engine, didn't you?
Yeah, because the guy thought that he blew up the engine because the timing belt snapped. And so I bought the car for everything else that was on it. I didn't even care about the engine at the time. And so I swapped over all of the transmission, axles, rear differential, all the brakes, because all of that altogether was like $10,000 worth of parts.
Wow.
And I got the car for very cheap.
Was it a WRX?
Yeah, it was another WRX.
Okay.
But
I somehow remember you, after you took the engine out, which requires what is that thing called?
Cherry picker.
Yeah. He got in where the engine.
Oh yeah, I took
That
some
was some
pictures
fun
of me
pictures,
standing in the engine bay. Yeah. But so I got all the drivetrain stuff put in the car, and then once I had completed that, a friend and I we opened up the motor to see if it was okay, and turns out the guy had turned off the car right away, and so the motor was fine. It just needed a new timing belt.
Wow.
And so I had to make some modifications to the motor to make it fit into my car because my car was slightly different than his. But so I made some changes to the motor to make it fit in mine, and then I had to get it tuned because it was like a custom built motor. So the normal Subaru motors, you had a 2-liter and you had a 2.5, and this guy had a Japanese 2-liter from the STI in Japan.
Cool.
But he had blown up the motor previously, and so he had a shop put a 2.1-liter stroker kit in it. So it was a 2.1-liter. And so you can't make that car run on a stock tune with that displacement. So I had to have it tuned, and so a friend of mine told me about this performance shop that could get it done that was nearby. And so I gave them a call, and they said, yeah, we can do it. And so they emailed me a tune, and I flashed it onto the car. And from that point on, it was, I think, 3 or 4 months of us getting the car just drivable enough so I could drive it to the shop to have it actually professionally dyno tuned.
Now, explain for people that don't know what that means.
Yeah, so a dynamometer is a device that basically measures how much energy something uses or how much energy something dissipates. So dynamometers can be used to measure how much power a wind turbine can generate.
Oh.
Or they can be used to see how much power a car makes. So it's all the same general. You're applying a load to a energy source, whether that's a turbine or a car's wheels, and you're measuring how much energy it's producing, essentially, how much power it's producing. And so a typical automotive dynamometer is the kind that you see at like an emissions facility.
Oh.
So like the rollers, when they put your car on the rollers, that's a dynamometer.
And the apparatus at the shop.
Yeah, so we had a dynamometer.
It's like a mini one of those kind of.
So they had a dynamometer at the shop, and so that's how they tune the cars. Is they basically just drive the car, to its absolute peak performance and make sure that everything is dialed in for ignition timing and air fuel ratios and boost levels and stuff.
And what's the ballpark when you pay for something like that?
I mean, it varies a lot based off of what kind of car you have, whether or not you live in a emissions controlled county and stuff like that. But the general rate in Colorado is about $1,000. Oh. But at the time, this was 5 years ago, it was only like $600.
Okay.
So I think I only paid $600 at the time. But so anyways, we got the car tuned. And a couple of months later, I was scrolling on Instagram and I saw that the shop that I had tuned my car was hiring for an entry-level position. And so I reached out to the guy and I said, hey, I might be interested in working at your shop. And he said, well, I've seen what you can do with cars because I've tuned your car, so I know that you're good at what you do. So he said, I can tell you're more of a rookie, but I wouldn't mind taking on a rookie. And he said, you kind of remind me of myself when I was your age. And he said, we'll do a formal interview and I'll let you know. And so I got really excited because, I'd always watched, YouTube channels and stuff of people building cars and tuning cars. And that was a great passion of mine. And so at the time, I kind of just went, oh, my God, I might be, falling into a career that I could do my whole life doing something I love. And it's just completely a byproduct of me having just pursued working on my car as a passion project. Right. And so we did the interview, and he said he had about 100 applicants.
Oh, wow. I don't remember that.
But he said he'd let me know how I did. And then about a week passed, and he let me know that I didn't get the job and that somebody else had gotten it. But he told me I was his number 2 pick. Right. So if anything happened, he'd let me know. And I said, okay, cool. And so I was pretty devastated from that. I kind of went back to I think I was just doing handiwork for your stepfather for at that point, just to make ends meet. And for those who don't know, your stepfather works in real estate property management. And so I was helping him with like maintenance on properties and stuff. And so that was a nice little odd job that I could come back to. And we kind of had an agreement that, when I was between jobs. It was a nice way that I could participate in sort of family business and make a little bit of money on the side and not just be home doing nothing, you know.
Well, you made a little money and
and you know, again, kind of learning life
Safely.
skills, learning how to do plumbing and roofing and diagnosing electrical issues in a house and stuff like that. And so that, that was a good way to stay busy while I, tried to figure out what I was going to do, because I was kind of riding on this. At that point I'd been unemployed for maybe 6 or 7 months, and so I was like, man, this would be a really nice. I missed working. I did miss working, and it was still height of the pandemic, so it was very restrictive on what kind of jobs you could get still, and everybody was still working from home. So anyways, I just sort of was completely lost, and at that point I did start to go, well, maybe I should look into going to school right now, because it's just a hard time in the world. And so I knew at that point I just wanted to do something
productive.
And so I started looking into the schools in Colorado, School of Mines, CU Denver, and Red Rocks Community College, and looking at their engineering degree programs. But I didn't really know which field I wanted. I didn't know the difference between the fields. And it's really hard to understand the difference between the fields when you're not actively, in academia.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of good resources out there that really explain the differences between the fields.
It's too bad.
And so out of me not really knowing which one of those fields I wanted to do, I kind of decided I said I was going to give myself a year to find a job. And this was, I don't think I ever communicated this to you. This was just sort of something I said to myself, is I'm going to give myself a year to try and find a job. And if I can't, I'm just going to go to school for an engineering degree. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks later, I got a call from the performance shop and said, hey, things didn't work out with the first guy. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
And so I think I was sobbing. I was just
you were so
oh
happy.
My God, like
you came home and put your arms up in the air and fell to your knees. And
it was, because not very many people get to do that kind of work.
Well, at the time, it was a dream job for you.
It was. No, it was. It really was. And it was, I still feel very humbled that I was chosen for that job.
With the cheerful sound of sparrows greeting the sun just outside my window, darkness transitions to a warm rose as my eyes flutter open to the pink painted walls of my bedroom. It's today. There is a peacefully sleeping toddler next to me, so I step gingerly to avoid the floorboards that I know might creak and wake him as I head to the kitchen for coffee. This is my house, our house, and I revel in the anticipation of what we will do today. What will be our great idea? Gray will show me. We have our own sanctuary. I had never had a house of my own. I had rented apartments. So I researched what was available in my price range and drove to a little house on the edge of my treasured North Denver neighborhood. These cute houses sitting next to each other as if old friends, with a canopy of mature trees overhead, presented themselves to me like charming little gift boxes. The surprises of their unique interiors invited me to fill them up with life. I had real responsibility now, and I fell in love with it. I was finally the cartographer of our own lives. With Gray, my life came into focus. The Stewart Street house was invisible from the street, hidden by a wonderfully giant blue spruce tree that would be all ours. The beige, vinyl-sided structure built in the 1920s was unremarkable, but to me, it was a castle. You just never know what events, plans, experiences will change the trajectory of your life for the good. And for me, definitely having my son Gray was a great route in my life, a journey in my life, and it still is. That is an excerpt from my book that was published a couple years ago called Getting Over Vivian. And if you're interested in hearing more, that book is available at local bookstores like Tattered Cover and Westside Books, or you can go ahead and find it on Amazon. Stay tuned for more chats with my son Gray in the coming months. And in the meantime, I would be grateful for you to like, rate, or subscribe, or all three, to my podcast, Colorado Soul Stories. See you soon.